Also shed some light on Rob and Michelle's anguish and regret in how they dealt with them. In one LA Times interview, Rob said, quote, "When Nick would tell us rehab wasn't working for him, we wouldn't listen. And because the people had diplomas on their wall, we listened to them when we should have been listening to our son."
Nick Reiner is now living through what many would call a real-life nightmare inside the Twin Towers jail, a place where darkness, neglect, and isolation crush the human spirit. The conditions there are far worse than anything he faced during his years battling addiction or sleeping on the streets. Just hours before his arrest, he had been surrounded by flashing lights, music, and champagne at a glamorous Hollywood party, soaking in the attention like a man reborn. But in a single night, all of that vanished. Now, Nick sits alone in a concrete cell, cut off from the world. Solitary confinement has become his new reality. The silence feels endless, and the walls seem to close in tighter every day. Reports describe filthy conditions, mold on the walls, stale food, and water that runs foul. The environment itself feels like punishment, long before any verdict is reached. Adding to the torment, Nick has reportedly endured severe mistreatment from those inside the system, all while maintaining that he's innocent. Every sunrise marks another day of exhaustion and fear, with no one to hear his cries. It's said that he spends hours pacing in silence, then collapses in despair, trapped between his own thoughts and the heavy air of confinement. And now, with the threat of a possible capital sentence hanging over his head, one chilling question refuses to fade. Is this truly justice, or something far darker? Nick faces 2 charges of first-degree homicide with special circumstances, meaning his punishment could be either life without parole or the ultimate sentence under California law. Even though California currently pauses all executions, the gravity of those charges remains crushing.
We even reflected in the film when the father says, you know, I listen to anybody with a desk and a diploma, because you're frightened, you know.
You don't know what to do, yeah.
You don't know what to do. Your main responsibility as a parent is to keep your child safe.
His preliminary hearing is set for early January 2026, and his future now lies in the hands of a system many describe as cold and unforgiving. When Nick finally appeared in court on the morning of the 17th, the crowd fell silent. His pale, hollow expression said more than words ever could. He looked like a man pulled straight out of the darkest corners of his own mind. When Nick entered the courtroom, it was clear he was in a fragile, distressed state. He wore a thick, heavy blue safety garment, the kind meant to protect those under extreme mental strain. The outfit clung to him like a cage made of fabric, stiff and uncomfortable, making even the smallest movement feel impossible. Beneath that bulky layer, there was nothing else. No normal clothing, no dignity left, only exposure and shame. Every step he took felt forced, every movement watched. It was the system's silent way of saying, you have no control anymore. 3 attorneys sat beside him, forming a barrier to block cameras and onlookers, but that didn't stop the world from seeing his struggle. Through the gaps, his trembling hands, his thin frame, and his ghostly pale skin told a story louder than words ever could. His hair looked unkempt, and his face carried the stillness of a man who hadn't felt sunlight or hope in weeks. For days, his expression stayed frozen. Blank eyes, motionless features, no spark of emotion left. When the judge asked if he wished to give up his right to a speedy trial, he barely managed to whisper a frail, "Yes, Your Honor." The sound of his voice was weak, like it came from the last bit of energy he had left in his soul. The hearing lasted only minutes. Nick sat there silently, almost lifeless, as if every breath hurt. When the judge again asked if he agreed to delay the formal proceedings, he repeated the same faint words. "Yes, Your Honor." His voice cracked, hoarse and broken, carrying the exhaustion of someone who had already lost too much.
You're scared, so you latch on to, you know, experts. And what I learned is that I know my son better, my wife knows my son better than experts do, and that he is smart, and and I have to listen to him.
Then, with guards on both sides, he was escorted out of the courtroom. His steps were slow and heavy, his shoulders bent under an invisible weight. The sight was haunting, a man fading away before everyone's eyes. That courtroom scene captured one thing above all: isolation. No family, no friends, no one to stand beside him. He faced the system completely alone. When the doors closed behind him and he was taken back to the Twin Towers jail, it wasn't just a transfer, it was a descent into something far more brutal. The Twin Towers Correctional Facility isn't an ordinary jail. It's one of the largest and toughest lockups in the world, a cold, towering complex in Los Angeles known for housing inmates struggling with severe mental health issues. To many, it's been described as a true nightmare. A place so harsh that just thinking about being there sends chills down the spine. Inside, the air is thick and suffocating. The walls drip with moisture and grime, covered in stains and rust that creep like infection through every crack. The smell is overpowering, a mix of sweat, mold, and decay that never fades. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your very skin. And then there are the rats. They run the place like they own it, darting through corridors, crawling under bunks, and gnawing on anything they can find. Some inmates say they wake up in the middle of the night to the scratch of tiny claws or the brush of fur across their faces. It's the kind of environment that breaks a person's mind long before a sentence is handed down. The cells are small, cold, and packed far beyond capacity. Many inmates have no proper bedding, forced to sleep shoulder to shoulder on bare concrete floors. The noise, the smell, the endless waiting, it all builds a sense of suffocation that's impossible to escape. This is where Nick Reiner now finds himself, trapped in a place designed not just to confine.
So was it a mistake, a critical mistake, for the desperate parents to listen to the experts instead of their addicted son? And if well-resourced parents like Rob and Michelle Reiner were still struggling to find a way forward, what are other parents supposed to do?
But to crush. Each day is a battle to stay sane, to survive another night without completely falling apart. The man who once lived under Hollywood lights now lives under flickering bulbs in one of the darkest corners of Los Angeles. And every echo in that cell reminds him, he's a long way from the world he once knew. Most inmates inside the Twin Towers jail are left with almost nothing, just a thin plastic sheet or a torn trash bag spread across the floor as a makeshift bed. The floors are often soaked with wastewater from overflowing toilets. The air heavy with a sour stench that clings to everything. Hygiene isn't a privilege here, it's a fantasy. Prisoners can go weeks without being allowed to shower, their clothes stiff with grime, their skin irritated from layers of dirt and sweat. Inside those aging walls, rot and decay are part of everyday life. Maggots reportedly crawl through rusty pipes and even drip from corroded shower heads, forcing many inmates to avoid the bathing areas entirely. The result? Skin infections, rashes, and diseases spread fast while medical care arrives too late, if it arrives at all. Violence brews quietly in corners, mixed with exhaustion and neglect. Guards rarely interfere unless things spiral out of control, their indifference turning fear into routine. Some of the most fragile inmates, those struggling with severe mental health challenges, face an even crueler reality. They're sometimes strapped into restraint chairs for hours or longer, unable to move, their limbs going numb while their minds unravel. Days blend into nights, and the constant noise, filth, and confinement eat away at whatever humanity they still have left. The building itself adds to the torment. The temperature swings like a pendulum. One day, it feels like a furnace. The next, it's freezing cold. Heating and air systems rarely work right, leaving people shivering under paper-thin blankets or gasping for air in suffocating heat. Despite Los Angeles County pouring hundreds of millions into renovations, lawsuits keep piling up. Human rights groups and state investigators have long condemned the facility's conditions as inhumane, describing it as a place that breaks the human spirit rather than rehabilitating it. It's not just a jail, it's a machine that drains hope out of everyone trapped inside. For Nick Reiner, life in that narrow isolation cell has become the most terrifying chapter of his existence. Every hour feels like a slow descent deeper into madness. The silence isn't peaceful, it's haunting. And then came the intake process. The cold, clinical moment where his identity was stripped away completely. He was fingerprinted, photographed, and documented with mechanical precision, like a number on a chart, not a person. One by one, the officers fired off emotionless questions. Do you have any mental health issues? Do you ever think about hurting yourself or others? Have you had thoughts of ending your life? Each question carried a hidden weight. It wasn't about care or concern. It was about sorting him, labeling him, deciding where he would be sent next. And just like that, with a single answer and a glance too long, Nick was redirected, not to an ordinary holding area, but to the part of the jail reserved for those considered unstable, unpredictable, or broken. From that moment forward, his world grew even smaller, his control completely gone. No one ever explained why Nick Reiner was placed in the section reserved for inmates with severe mental health struggles. There was no statement, no paperwork made public, nothing. Somewhere between the transport van and the intake process, he must have said or done something that convinced officials his mind was unstable. And in this place, that alone was enough. Suspicion itself became a sentence. This was the most hidden and restrictive part of the Twin Towers Correctional Facility. A unit called High Observation Housing. It's where the system sends those believed to be in the deepest danger, placed under relentless suicide watch. These weren't normal cells. They were isolation chambers buried in the heart of the building, designed to cut off every shred of contact with the outside world. Each one a cold, silent tomb where the mind becomes its own prison. Nick's cell was shockingly small, barely a few square meters surrounded by thick, unyielding concrete. There were no cracks in the walls, no window to the sky, just a heavy steel door with a tiny slot near the bottom where food was pushed through. The only light came from a harsh, white fluorescent bulb that burned 24 hours a day. It never dimmed, never switched off. Day and night blurred together until time lost meaning. He was forced to wear a dark blue safety smock, rough, heavy, and impossible to tear. It scratched his skin and reminded him constantly that he was no longer trusted even with himself. No pants, no shoes, no personal items. Everything was taken, stripped away until there was nothing left but his thoughts. Even his body felt like it didn't belong to him anymore. No communication was allowed. No calls, no letters, no family visits. Only lawyers and mental health staff could see him, and even then, only through thick glass walls. Every encounter felt distant, sterile, like watching life from the other side of a screen. Meals came through the slot in the door. No tray, no utensils, only soft food, designed so that nothing could be used to cause harm. The guards watched constantly, rotating in endless shifts. Every 15 minutes, one would peer through the small window in his door, clipboard in hand, jotting down notes. Their footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, clanging keys, scribbles of pens, the soundtrack of a life reduced to observation. Around him, the sounds of others filled the air. Screams, pounding fists, incoherent crying, haunting whispers that echoed through the concrete. Some shouted names that didn't exist, others talked to invisible people. Those sounds crawled through the walls day and night until they became a permanent background hum of despair. At night, when the noise died down, the silence turned eerie. The ventilation system emitted a high-pitched whine, carrying with it the foul smell of old air mixed with years of sweat, waste, and decay. The space felt alive, like it breathed in misery and exhaled hopelessness. Many former inmates have said it felt like being buried alive, every minute heavier than the last. The cell's cold air clung to the skin, and the endless humming light burned behind the eyes until sleep became impossible. It wasn't just punishment, it was slow psychological collapse. For Nick, once surrounded by Hollywood glamour and wealth, this was a descent no one could imagine. From lavish parties and mansion rooftops to this freezing cell where time stands still. His fall from grace couldn't be more brutal. All he had left were the haunting sounds around him and the weight of his own thoughts pressing harder every day. Experts say that even a few weeks in such conditions can shatter a person's mind beyond repair. And that appears to be exactly what Nick is now enduring. Each second stretches endlessly in that sterile tomb where his mental health spirals deeper into chaos. He's not just locked away physically, he's trapped in his own head, battling endless waves of guilt, confusion, and fear. The jail calls his area an unobstructed observation unit, meaning every inch of it is visible to guards at all times. There's nothing in there that can be moved, broken, or hidden. No bed frame, no desk, no mirror, just flat surfaces and cold walls. He is under constant watch, his life reduced to a series of monitored movements and scribbled reports. This is the kind of existence that erases a person's sense of identity. There's no privacy, no dignity, no silence that brings peace, only silence that screams. Nick Reiner, once the troubled son of Hollywood, is now just another name on a clipboard, another flicker under fluorescent light, living minute by minute in a world that seems determined to erase him completely. On paper, this setup might sound orderly, controlled, standardized, even safe. But in reality, it's something far darker. It's a place where cold air bites the skin, and total exposure replaces any sense of safety. Here, isolation and non-stop surveillance merge into one relentless storm that never ends. There are no bars, no comforting walls to hide behind, just a steel door with a narrow window, the kind you'd see in a prison documentary. Inside, everything is visible. Every inch of space is open to the eyes of others. The design of the cell removes all privacy. It's as if the system wants to erase any trace of personal dignity. 3 or 4 of these cells stand side by side, each one completely exposed through wide windows. Anyone walking past can see inside, every movement, every gesture. Nick can't cover himself, can't create a moment of privacy, not even by draping a sheet across the glass. He isn't allowed one. All he has is a thin blue mat, barely thicker than cardboard, to keep him off the freezing concrete floor. There's no blanket to hold, no bed frame to rest on, no private toilet, just a cold, stripped space and a single rough garment that serves as his only covering. The air stays icy and dry, the fluorescent light humming above him endlessly. Every second is a battle between mind and body, between trying to endure and simply trying to stay sane. Officers stand at the control desk nearby, their eyes fixed on the observation windows. Every breath, every twitch, every glance is recorded and noted. It's impossible to escape that constant stare. Living under that level of scrutiny breaks something deep inside. It's not physical punishment, but it eats at a person's soul all the same. Every minute feels like a silent test of how long one can stand being watched without losing all sense of self. This area of the jail also doubles as the main intake zone, where new arrivals are fingerprinted, photographed, checked by medical staff, and interrogated for psychological evaluation. Any look, word, or movement can be interpreted as a warning sign and trigger more restrictions. It's a process designed for control, not compassion. And it's not just guards who can see him. Other inmates walk by, glance in, and sometimes laugh or mock what they see. There's no barrier, no curtain, no escape from the humiliation. Day after day, Nick lives inside a box made of exposure. His body, his actions, even his silence under constant judgment. He has nowhere to hide, nowhere to rest his mind. Only the chill of the concrete floor, the buzz of artificial light, and the unblinking eyes of others watching him around the clock. In that moment of realization, when he truly understands that every movement is being observed, the full weight of his situation hits him. The cruelty here isn't loud or violent, it's quiet, steady, and psychological. It's the slow suffocation of dignity. One heartbeat, one glance, one breath at a time. Nick Reiner now lives in a world where space itself feels like a trap, and every glance becomes a form of control. Each passing minute tests his sanity and his strength. It's like being on display, not as a person, but as something to be studied, judged, and contained. Except this isn't a zoo. It's far worse. Every gesture, every twitch of his hand, every glance of his eyes is being watched, recorded, and analyzed. Privacy no longer exists. The cold emptiness of the cell strips away not just comfort, but dignity, turning every moment into a quiet kind of torment that only he can truly understand. Every single thing he does is monitored. Even the smallest action can trigger another search. One more round of humiliation, where guards tear through what little he owns, looking for anything that might break their rules. If they so much as suspect he might be hiding something, on whether it's contraband or nothing at all, he can be instantly transferred to a stricter cell. In this place, suspicion alone is enough to destroy what little stability a person has left. Every 15 minutes without fail, staff come to check on him. They knock, they look in, they write something down, and even if Nick is sleeping, they wake him. Peace doesn't exist here. Sleep comes in broken fragments, snatched between interruptions. The moment he drifts off, another light, another voice, another check jolts him awake again. The exhaustion isn't physical anymore. It's mental, a deep fatigue that makes time blur and reality twist. But it's not just the guards watching him, other inmates can see him too. They walk past, stare, and sometimes taunt, a reminder that even in isolation, he's never truly alone. The constant exposure grinds away at his mind, leaving him feeling stripped bare, like a shadow of his former self. The pressure of being under continuous watch crushes any remaining sense of control. Every second becomes a battle just to keep his composure. This unit isn't built for healing or rehabilitation. It's built for control control. Every rule, every restriction, every check is designed to remind those inside that they have no autonomy. No softness, no comfort, only cold concrete, hard lights, and silence filled with fear. Here, willpower and sanity are tested in the harshest ways possible. The human mind can only endure so much before it starts to crack, and in this place, that line is crossed every single day. Nick's stay became even harder when he refused to admit guilt. That defiance marked him. His silence became an act of rebellion, and jail staff reportedly escalated the psychological pressure. The message was clear. Confess or suffer until you break. What followed wasn't physical harm, but an invisible war on his mind. They turned questioning into an endless cycle, asking the same things again and again, tightening the mental screws until he could barely think straight. The interrogation room was a chamber of tension. Gray walls, bright lights, and the faint hum of a camera recording every move he made. The officers' voices filled the space, circling him like a trap. The questions came fast, then slow, then fast again, a rhythm meant to disorient and drain him. They threw out veiled threats, warning him that things would get worse if he didn't cooperate. Nick sat there trembling, feeling the pressure of authority closing in on him. Each question hit like a weight, each glare another blow to his fading strength. His breathing grew shallow. His hands shook uncontrollably. The cold wall in front of him became the only thing keeping him grounded as his thoughts spiraled. What had started as questioning turned into a psychological cage, a place where the mind itself became the battleground. Each time Nick Reiner tried to hold his ground and insist on his innocence, the questioning became more forceful, more suffocating. The room felt colder, the air heavier. He could hear the quiet hum of machines, the shuffle of papers, and that same calm but cutting voice repeating over and over again, "You know what really happened, don't you? Just be honest." Every small reaction he made, lowering his head, wiping his face, trembling, was taken as proof that he was hiding something. His silence became fuel for more suspicion, more pressure. For hours at a time, Nick sat alone in that stark interrogation room, stripped of everything familiar. He wasn't allowed to see anyone except his attorney, and even those visits were rare and brief. The walls seemed to close in, amplifying every sound, the echo of footsteps, the slam of distant doors, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Each noise felt like a threat, a reminder that he had no escape. The emptiness swallowed him whole, filling every corner of his mind with dread and confusion. Then came the cruelest trick of all. Psychological games. Officers reportedly pretended to have letters from his family, waving them just beyond reach behind the glass window. Nick's heart surged as he rushed to the door, pounding on it, his voice raw as he shouted, "Let me see them, please, just once." But instead of compassion, they laughed coldly. One of them repeated the same chilling line, "Confess, and then you can read them." It broke something inside him. The emotional weight became unbearable. His voice cracked as he screamed, "I didn't do it! I didn't do it!" The words weren't just a denial anymore. They were the final cry of someone being mentally crushed by forces he couldn't fight. Every shout, every plea echoed through the hallways like a haunting sound of desperation that refused to fade. Those moments pushed Nick to the very edge of his sanity. He began whispering to himself in the dark, his voice trembling and uneven. "I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong." The words were meant to calm him, but instead they looped endlessly, bouncing off the bare walls, growing more frantic each time. The more he spoke, the more hopeless it sounded. The silence after each whisper was worse than the words themselves, as if even the air was mocking him. And then the breakdown came. When the pressure reached its peak, Nick collapsed into uncontrollable sobbing, deep guttural cries that echoed through the cell. The screams were raw, painful, mixed with choking breaths and shattered apologies. His words blurred into a desperate confession of regret and guilt, not for what he was accused of, but for everything that had led him there. "Mom, Dad, please forgive me. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." His cries filled the room, rough, broken sounds that seemed to tear out pieces of his spirit with every breath. He clutched his head, rocking back and forth, lost between memory and madness. Tears streamed down his pale face, dripping onto the cold floor as he repeated over and over again, I'm sorry, I hurt you." The rhythm of his sobbing was almost like a heartbeat, a painful, steady beat marking the collapse of his mind. The guards saw it all. Even when they passed his cell at night, his cries didn't stop. Sometimes he would turn toward them, whispering, "I'm innocent. Please don't misunderstand." His voice carried a strange mixture of fear and pleading. Not just for freedom, but for understanding. It was as though he was begging the world not to erase the person he once was. Other times, he didn't speak at all. He would just sit hunched over on the thin mat, his body trembling uncontrollably, his eyes fixed on nothing. In those moments, he seemed almost hollow, like a shadow of himself. Quietly, he muttered, "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I ruined everything. I didn't want this." His voice barely rose above a whisper, sounding less like speech and more like a fading thought escaping his mind. That bare, colorless room became an echo chamber of pain. Every sound, every tear, every whispered apology looping endlessly into the darkness. There was no closure, no comfort, no relief, just the same cycle. Watching, waiting, breaking, and crying again. The constant exposure, the endless interrogation, and the emotional manipulation left Nick trapped in an unbearable limbo. His words, his pain, his guilt, all swallowed by four cold walls that showed no mercy, no compassion, and no end. He spoke to himself in the darkness, begging, whispering, trying to hold on to the last fragments of who he once was. Every second felt like a battle between fear, shame, and the desperate urge to survive. There was no one beside him, no one to understand the pain that had carved itself into his soul. In the cold stillness, Nick muttered words that cut like glass. "I don't deserve to live, but I have to do something so my parents won't hurt anymore." His trembling voice was part plea, part confession, a broken echo of guilt and despair bouncing off the walls of his cell. That image of Nick, crying and whispering apologies into the silence, became a daily routine. His voice raw, his hands shaking, his mind unraveling under endless isolation. Each sob, each trembling word became a punishment of its own. The suffering wasn't just emotional, it was physical, mental, spiritual. Nick Reiner became the very embodiment of despair itself. He lived as a man haunted by guilt, trapped between reality and regret. No one could reach him, no one could save him. The lights above flickered cold and harsh, the air heavy with the sound of his shallow breathing. His life, once filled with privilege and promise, had narrowed down to this: a cell, a blue smock, and a camera watching his every move. Now, as his case moves forward, one question looms over everything. What will happen next? What fate awaits him beyond those courthouse doors when the eyes of the world turn once more toward the son of Rob and Michelle Reiner? Nick now stands charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, accused of taking the lives of both his parents. These are the most severe charges under California law, carrying the possibility of life imprisonment without parole or even the ultimate penalty. Prosecutors have cited aggravating factors, the use of a weapon and multiple victims, making the stakes unimaginably high. Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman has stated that a final decision on whether to pursue the harshest sentence will depend on consultations with the victims' remaining family members. Though executions remain under moratorium in California, a formal death sentence can still be recorded, lingering like a permanent shadow over the accused. Nick's next scheduled court appearance is on January 7th, 2026, when he will stand before the judge for arraignment. There, the formal charges will be read aloud, and he will decide whether to enter a plea. Until then, he remains confined without bail, dressed in a suicide prevention garment, monitored around the clock in solitary confinement. Each day until that hearing is another test of endurance, another chapter of silence, cold air, and sleepless nights. Nick's defense attorney, Alan Jackson, a seasoned Los Angeles lawyer known for handling high-profile criminal cases, has already requested delays in certain proceedings. His reasoning? Nick's current mental state. Jackson argues that Nick must undergo further psychiatric evaluation before being deemed fit to appear safely in court. The defense's primary concern is ensuring Nick's well-being while safeguarding his right to a fair and lawful trial. One possible path for the defense could involve mental health grounds. Nick has a history of psychological instability, including previous treatment for schizophrenia. If his attorneys can prove that his condition made him legally incapable of understanding his actions or the wrongfulness of them at the time of the tragedy, it could shift the course of the entire case. However, the bar for such a defense is incredibly high. In the U.S. legal system, it's not enough to show that someone was mentally ill. It must be proven that their illness directly impaired their ability to distinguish right from wrong during the act itself. Courts rarely accept this argument without overwhelming evidence and consistent medical evaluation. Even if successful, it wouldn't mean freedom. It would simply mean a different kind of confinement, long-term psychiatric treatment under strict supervision, likely for the rest of his life. If the court accepts that Nick is currently unfit to stand trial, proceedings would pause while he undergoes compulsory treatment, possibly for months or even years. Only when doctors declare him competent would the case move forward again. This uncertainty leaves Nick's future hanging in limbo, trapped between legal definitions of guilt and medical assessments of sanity. No matter how it unfolds, the road ahead for Nick Reiner is bleak. Whether through a life sentence, a suspended death ruling, or an indefinite stay in a psychiatric facility, his future is defined by confinement. Gone are the bright lights, the Hollywood connections, the promise of redemption. What remains is an endless stretch of time, marked by silence, regret, and the weight of his own past. Behind bars, Nick endures an existence stripped of humanity. Every movement is watched, every breath documented. There's no comfort, no real human touch, only the cold hum of surveillance cameras and the distant echo of doors slamming shut. The environment is designed to crush the spirit, to erase individuality until nothing remains but compliance and stillness. He spends his days pacing a few steps back and forth, his nights staring into the flickering ceiling light, unable to sleep. The air is stale, heavy with disinfectant and despair. Even the sound of his own breathing feels foreign, mechanical. The silence is unbearable, yet the noise of his thoughts is worse. He relives that night over and over again, searching for meaning in chaos, but all he finds is emptiness. It's a haunting reality that someone born into fortune and fame, surrounded by everything the world could offer, could end up in a place this cold and cruel. Nick Reiner's fall from grace is almost cinematic. The privileged son turned outcast, the life of glamour replaced with a cell of endless surveillance. It's not just a story about crime. It's about mental decline, broken family ties, and the human mind pushed past its limits. From glittering Hollywood parties to a cell colder than steel, the contrast is staggering. Once adored, now isolated. Once photographed in luxury, now watched by security cameras. Nick's story forces us to ask difficult questions about punishment, accountability, and mental illness within the justice system. What truly defines justice in cases like this? Is it punishment, rehabilitation, or something else entirely? And what happens to someone when guilt and sickness become tangled beyond repair? Nick's story isn't just tragic, it's haunting. It's a warning of how fast a life can collapse, how quickly privilege can turn to isolation, and how thin the line is between glamour and ruin. What do you think about Nick Reiner's devastating downfall? Should systems do more to protect mental health behind bars? Or are some crimes simply too severe to ever forgive? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to stay updated as we continue uncovering the truth behind the most shocking and deeply human stories the world has ever seen. See you on the next one.